Okay, good morning, everyone. This is the Freiburg New Church Assembly. It is Thursday, I think the 7th now, August already. And I am Reverend Hugh Odhner from the Bernathen area. I am going to be speaking on, my title is kind of compound, States of Regeneration, Stages of Faith Development. For those of you who are here for Kevin Baxter's excellent talk on stages of faith development or stages of development, it was an excellent talk, so much so that I asked him to send me the slides, which he did. There are 63 of them. I will not review all those slides, but I'm going to use 3 of them. The first one I don't have a slide of that he gave. For some reason it didn't register, but he mentioned somebody named Keegan. I'm not familiar with that name. And the 5 orders of consciousness. So stage 1, the impulsive mind, typically seen in early childhood, where thinking is driven by immediate impulses and needs. Those of us who have had children are familiar with that. Then stage 2, the instrumental mind, common in older children and some adults. This stage is characterized by self-centered perspective, and people at this stage see relationships as transactional and first focus on personal gain, rules, and consequences. Stage 3, the socialized mind. Most adults, he says, operate at this level. People internalize the values, expectations, and the norms of their group, family, or culture and religion. Their sense of self is shaped by external influences, and they seek approval of others. Then comes stage 4, which he calls the self-authoring mind. At this stage, individuals develop their own values, beliefs, and identity, independent of external expectations. They can critically examine society's norms and construct a personal framework for decision making. And his last stage is stage 5, the self-transforming mind. That kind of gives us right away, self-transforming. This is the rarest and most advanced stage where individuals go beyond their own constructed frameworks and engage in ongoing reflection. They hold multiple perspectives at once, embrace complexity, and see things independently. Now we can go on to the first slide. This is a good time to say, how did I get to this topic? It was due to email correspondence where it was mentioned that George Dole was impressed by the work of James Fowler. Well, I had studied Fowler's work back when I was taking courses. I think that one was actually at LaSalle University, but I was working on a master's at Villanova. And I was impressed by Fowler's stages of faith. And I gave away one of his books, because I found I had 2 copies of it. It was very much impressed me, and when I found that George had been impressed by it, I was thrilled. And so I'm still in the stage of rereading the book, to find out what I'd forgotten, which is a great deal. So we got the slide up there? Good. This is James Fowler's stages of faith. Whereas Keegan had 5, he has 6. The first stage, as you can see, is primal faith, proximate age, infancy, And trust is formed through relationships. Foundational emotional experiences shape the future faith. Then comes the first stage, the real first stage, intuitive projective faith. He has approximate ages of 3 to 7. Imaginative, fantasy-driven faith influenced by stories, images, and adult examples. In other words, children are watching us, and they're listening to us, and they love stories. Oh, many people older than that love stories too. Then comes mythical, literal faith, ages 7 to 12 is where he puts it. The beliefs are understood literally. Stories and morality are concrete and dualistic. In other words, there's right and there's wrong. Sometimes we see that with kids in school. You know, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. It's an absolute rule. Then comes synthetic conventional faith of adolescence. The faith is shaped by peers and authority figures. The values are internalized, can be strongly held, but they're not critically examined at this stage. They're taken from others. Then comes individuative reflective faith, young adulthoods. Personal responsibility for beliefs emerges, questioning and reflection, exploration begin. That's where you get the states we have been through in a young adult, where we actually start questioning the things that others have taught us, which is a very valuable state. We don't mature really without it. Then he has conjunction faith, midlife and beyond, acceptance of paradox and mystery, openness to other traditions, and the complexity of truth. And then comes universalizing faith. He notes it's rare, often in later life, embodied in love and justice. It's transcendent vision, living for the universal good. And he gives examples with Gandhi and Martin Luther King. One of the things I noticed in this stage is people of different faith systems have much in common because it's universal. They've universalized it. They can appreciate, even though they have their own faith system, they can still appreciate the faith systems of others and work with it. And they can see the values in others' faith beliefs. I think we see that in what Swedenborg says about the value in other religions. And, you know, goes on, there's not a religion anywhere that doesn't have certain elements of the Ten Commandments. So that was Fowler's stages of faith. I was, as I said, very impressed with that. And then we get to another one. This one is pretty recent to me, and it's George Dole's Stages of Spiritual Development. And this is found in his book, A Book About Us, taken from that. But he wrote something earlier, which was he never published, which was a progression of faith based on certain stories. So we go through Dole's stages of spiritual development. You notice Fowler was stages of faith, Keegan was stages of consciousness, and Dole was spiritual development. Stage 1, innocence of ignorance in infancy. It's trust without knowledge. It's the type of thing where children have an absolute trust in what we say, but they don't yet have the knowledge other than what we say. Then comes obedience, early childhood, following rules because we're told to. Does that also cover a 2-year-old? Which is the stage of no. Then comes responsibility, late childhood to adolescence, acting from a sense of duty, internalization of right and wrong, emerging conscious and moral accountability. That acting from a sense of duty we often see in the military. We do things in the military because it's our duty to do so. And we might question some of the things, but we do it anyhow because it's our responsibility, it's our duty to do so. Then comes what he calls shattering faith, adolescence to young adulthood. It's questioning and breaking down the things we were taught before. It can result in a crisis of faith or identity, a dismantling of inherited beliefs. And then the seeking faith, because it's building up what was shattered. Early to mid-adulthood, searching for deeper truth. I think that's where people start exposed to Swedenborg, start saying, hey, there's something in here. And then comes innocence of wisdom. The earliest was the innocence of ignorance in childhood. This is the innocence of wisdom. He says mature adulthood and beyond. When he says mature adulthood, I put that as somewhere older than I am. A willingness to be grounded in the understanding. It's an integration of love and wisdom, spiritual maturity, acting freely from deep compassion. That's his stages. Now, we'll go to the next slide. Oh, excuse me, yeah. These were all put together, Keegan, Fowler, and Dole, and he's got the general age, Keegan's Orders of Consciousness, Fowler's Faith Development, and Dole's A Book About Us, Spiritual Growth. And it's everything I was just talking about lined up somewhat together. And sometimes they don't line up exactly because, for example, Keegan had 5, the others had 6. Next slide. Oh, that's right. This was another one that the Genesis one didn't turn out. Yeah, that's it, number 4. This is the Genesis story with some underlining. And most of us may be familiar with this. It's a literal sense of the first chapter of Genesis. And it progresses from evening to morning, the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth day, the 5th day, and then we change chapters and we get to the 7th day. I didn't include the 7th day, but it's spoken of. These are actually states of regeneration, but I could call them stages of faith also because our faith changes as we go through the states of regeneration. So, let's see. The first day, which is the first state of regeneration, is that which proceeds, including both the state from infancy and that immediately before regeneration. In other words, you might say in regeneration, it's called the first state, but it's immediately before regeneration, but it's called the first state of regeneration. And it's called a void and emptiness, thick darkness. The first motion, which is the Lord's mercy, is the Spirit of God hovering upon the faces of the waters. One of the things, let's see, I have it here somewhere. This is described, and what I'm using is what is in the Arcana is the contents going through that. But following that is a section called the internal sense. That's where each of these are treated in somewhat more depth. And the internal sense for this first state says the earth was void and emptiness, and darkness was upon the faces of the deep, and the Spirit of God was brooding upon the faces of the waters. And then it says, before his regeneration, a person is called the earth, void and empty, and also the ground, wherein nothing of good and truth has been sown. A void denotes where there is nothing of good, empty, and nothing of truth. Hence comes thick darkness, and I like this, that is stupidity, and then ignorance of all things belonging to faith in the Lord. Now, by the Spirit of God is meant the Lord's mercy, which is said to move or brood as a hen broods over her eggs. The things over which it moves are such as the Lord has hidden and treasured up in a person, which in the word throughout are called remains. Many of us are familiar with those. They're stored up from infancy. They're states of truth or cognitions or knowledges, but they're also states of good. For example, a state of innocence, which is stored up for later use because it will emerge later. And really, throughout our regeneration, we need that underlying state of innocence. The first thing we have, earliest infancy, I'd say the baby is receiving it, and yet it's stored up by the Lord internally, deeply, and we all have it. And there are states that these states are stored so deeply we can't really get at them, and we need them to live. We'll go on to the second state. And it says, second state is when a distinction is made between those things which are of the Lord, those things which are proper to a person. The things which are of the Lord are called in the word remains, and are here especially knowledges of faith which have been learned from infancy, and which are stored up and are not manifested until a person comes into this state. At the present day, it says, this state seldom exists without temptation, misfortune, or sorrow, by which the things of the body and of the world, and such things are proper to a person, that is proprium, are brought into quiescence. It's unfortunate that with most of us, it takes a state of misfortune for us to start reflecting on these things. But they are already stored in us. It's just that something needs to happen to activate them in us. That's the second state. The third state is called a state of repentance, in which the person from his internal man, notice this, speaks piously and devoutly and brings forth goods, like works of charity, but which are nevertheless inanimate. This is the day in which plants are created, which are inanimate. They're living, but they're inanimate. And so, the reason they're inanimate in this state is that a person thinks that they are from himself. This is called a state of repentance. Many of us take credit for our good, the things we are repenting of, but we still have this, that I'm doing it, not that the Lord is doing it. We repent of sins against the Lord, but we're doing it from ourselves. And so they're called inanimate. They have some life in them, though. Now, that's the third state. The fourth state is when a person becomes affected with love and illuminated by faith. Notice that, affected by love, illuminated by faith. And it says, he indeed previously discoursed, taught piously, and brought forth goods, but did so in consequences of the temptation and straitness under which he labored. I think that is related to the third state, which is a state of repentance, but we think it's from ourselves. The fourth state is affected by love, illuminated by faith, but there's a lot of self in there, and so we are laboring under a state of trying to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. But we're also having a great fear by this time of going to hell. In other words, we don't want to go down there. We want to go up there because it may look like a much better place to be. You might say a state of straightness, doing the right thing. And we're in temptation because in this state we are still wanting to do the opposite. We want to do our own thing. And sometimes, in this case, our own thing is not really good. This is where we get into states like, I really want to get even with that person. They did me wrong. And we know that it's the wrong thing to think, the wrong thing to do, but we still want to do it. In other words, we're operating more out of a state of faith, knowing what is right and wrong, but still wanting to do what we want to do. And I think in this state, if we could get away with it, we'd be tempted to do so. But what holds us back is this thing called conscience. That on one hand, we want to do what we want to do. We want to get even, exact vengeance. We know that it is wrong, and that voice of conscience is speaking to us, saying, you know that that's not the right thing to do. And because some of us listen to our conscience, we don't do it. And this is a state where I envision what is said about those angels and spirits, that the little devil is on one shoulder and the angel is on the other, each one trying to get our attention. And one is saying, do this, you can get away with it. And the other one is saying, but it's the wrong thing to do, and you know it. That is affected with love because the love is now coming in, manifesting itself, because of a love of wanting to do what is right. And also, though, a love of wanting to do what we want to do. A conflict. I think this is more it says in consequences of temptation, because we're in temptation between these two states. And it says the straightness under which he labored, that's doing the right thing because we know it's the right thing to do, even though as yet we don't really love it. And yet deep down we have to love it, for otherwise what would be our motivation? There is that, and all at a deeper level, there's that innocence. And it's changing. The fifth state, it says, is when a person discourses, speaks from faith, and thereby confirms himself in truth and good. This is important. One of the things that the word talks about is the danger of confirming ourselves in evils. In other words, we're inclined to, and sometimes slip up, and we do what is wrong. But what is very dangerous is when we confirm it. You might say our will is steering us to do what is wrong, but it's when it brings in our understanding to say, yeah, he deserved it, and I did the right thing. Don't we all have some of that at times? Except when we get beyond this state. And it's a deeper temptation, too, to know that we have done wrong and then are wanting to make it right to ourselves or to others. That's where you get little kids trying to, they know they did something wrong, but they want to pretend they didn't know, or some other things that, or I did it because he hit me first. There's that state of trying to confirm, but it shows up very early. But the danger with us is that we know something is wrong and we want to twist it, to make it as if it's right. In this state also, what's that song, Angels Hovering Around? Yeah, they're on one shoulder. There are also devils hovering around, unfortunately, and they're on the other shoulder. That's the way I vision them. And they're trying to get us to confirm that, oh, it wasn't so bad. It was actually the right thing to do. And yet we know that it's the wrong thing. Still, the things that are produced in this state, this is a fifth state, are animate, they're living. This is where you have the fishes and the whales and living things, birds. So fifth state. Then we move on to the sixth state. And it says, when from faith and thence from love. So we're not operating just out of faith, but we've got love combined with it. A person speaks what is true and does what is good. Notice it's not so much doing what is good from self now, or attributing good to himself, but he does what is good. The things he brings forth are then called the living soul and the beast. In other words, moving animals. And he begins to act at once together from both faith and love. And it says he becomes a spiritual man or a spiritual person. Notice the combination now. He begins to act at the same time from faith, what he believes, and also now what he loves. They are bound together. That brings up the song, Bind Us Together. But it's referring to bind us together in our own mind and soul. So it becomes spiritual. And at this point, he is called an image. And it says his spiritual life is delighted and sustained by such things as belong to the knowledges of faith and to the works of charity, which are called as food. His natural life is delighted and sustained by those things which belong to the body and the senses. So you have this spiritual life, but you still have this natural life, and they are in conflict with each other. The natural life, the natural level, is still not listening to the spiritual side. The spiritual side is manifesting itself, but it's a conflict. And so it says, whence a combat arises until love gains dominion. And the person becomes, it says, celestial, which is the next state in chapter 2 of Genesis. And then it wraps up here. You notice how Keegan and also Fowler talked about the greatest number of people seem to be in this state or that state. They don't get to the highest state. The same thing is here. The greatest part, that is, of people, at this day attain only the first state, which is actually the void and emptiness. Some only the second, others the third, fourth, or fifth, few the sixth, and scarcely anyone the seventh. So if I take those literally, it means that very few people get into a celestial state. Now, one of the other things we're talking about, and Kevin referred to, is there are different parts of us. We can see in ourselves at times that we are more complex than just these, all of us is this first state, the second state, the third state, which I think is true, but there's parts of us that are in one state and parts of us that are in another state. So we're complex. There's parts of us that are celestial, or maybe, but parts of us that are quite natural and not spiritual at all. So we're a mixture of these. It just popped into my mind. How many of us really like playing card games? Now, is that a celestial state or a natural state? It could be both. It could be a diversion of charity, as they say. There is a danger in it, however. I like card games so much that when I was in college, I spent more time playing cards than I did studying. That didn't go so well. But while I was doing it, I was really immersed in it. And even today, how many people here know Minecraft? I can get deeply immersed in Minecraft. And it was my daughter who got me addicted to it. But it's not her fault. She just put a game in front of me that I could be addicted to. Another one that is the game called Civilization. Yeah. I was, it's wearing off, but I was highly addicted to Civilization 3. So much so, and those of you who get addicted to it know that you cannot go to bed. You just keep going and going and going until finally you're forced to say, I've got to go to bed. I've got school tomorrow, or some other such thing. I've got to get up. So for some of us, those games, which I think are on the natural level, but can have a spiritual aspect to them, can be, shall I say, detrimental to our spiritual life. When they become, we don't need a drug, we've got Minecraft. or, um, or civilization. The nice thing is I can talk with some of the younger people about these things because they have the same temptations that I do. And boy, I'm at the opposite end of the age spectrum. So some things never quite go away. But that is an example of games and so forth that can serve a dual use. They're on the natural level, but they can serve as what they call recreations of the mind, diversions of charity, and also a means of social life when you're interacting with others. The interaction goes beyond the game itself. It's interacting with other people, developing relationships, even if it's over a game. But that is where combat arises, when we're really addicted to certain natural things. Let's see, what did Denise expose about me the other day?
You say you're lazy.
Yes, which I am. And but it took me until fairly recently to really realize the depth of that, and that it has been with me from, I can't say from childhood because I don't remember that, but I sure did like to put off mowing the lawn. You know, there were better things to do than go over and mow my grandmother's lawn. And I used to have a great interest in fossils, which I still have an interest in. That is rocks, fossils, and what was the other thing? Radio. Back in the days before computers, there was radio. And I was highly interested in that. That was what I did with the time that I should have been doing something else. So the natural things can be a distraction, but they're also very useful. I'm finished. So we have 10 minutes, I believe, for questions, comments. Chapter 2. And I didn't want to move on to chapter 2 because I knew that if I did, I wouldn't be. The other thing is it lines much more closely with Dole and Fowler and Keegan.
Yeah. We often talk about how children are educated out of their initial innocence, start thinking more and doing more. And I've shared this with a few of you already, but my daughter Grace's daughter, Charlotte, she's my only granddaughter. I have 5 grandchildren, but she's the only girl. And she's 4, and we do FaceTime. They live in Florida. And she was jumping on the bed one day, and Grace is holding the phone. And they used to live near us, but then they moved when she was about 2. And she was jumping on the bed, just being her little cheerful self. And all of a sudden, she stops, and she looks me in the eye on the phone, and she calls me Gaga. She says, Gaga, all the time in my heart. And I'm so impressed by that. She was in touch with her remains. It was beautiful.
I could explore another way of going through these stages and relating the stages to the 7 days of creation. I have a different.
Kevin, by the way, cautioned me when he sent me the slides that it's a work in progress. He is not finished. Because one, he's studying other authors, and two, we tend to rethink some of these things. Same with me. I have to read these other authors, grasp what they're really talking about, and then put it into a way that makes sense to me. So you've got a job for next year. So both of you, I'm really hoping you'll be here next year.
I just want to say I appreciate, once again, just something very practical and me. And these times are helpful because I work with children a lot, and even in life, just remembering that there are different stages that I shouldn't expect someone who's 12-year-old or an adult, and also remembering that in each of us we have at some point we're, in some parts of our lives, sometimes we're going to be a little, we're going to be struggling more looking at things that others we won't. So just, I just find it really helpful to have it all.
This stage. Kevin said that he found them somewhat restrictive because, as he realized, parts of us are in one state and parts of us are in another. And yet, all together, we're a whole.
Susanna, I wanted to speak to the third stage
Mm-hmm.
because not in this particular slide, but previously it talked about influence by peers. And some of the people who are involved in just activities particularly don't approve, but that they are feeling from their peers to stay right with them and hold the same ideals and the same values.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to grow from there because that would separate them from the group that they're a part of. That just helps me have a little compassion because from a higher state you can look at the lower states, but from the lower state you can't envision anything else because that's where you are.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Hi, this is Martha. I appreciated when you were saying about in the different stages about the deeper temptations, and they were still there, and they were deeper, which made me think about the more you know, the more you're responsible for.
There's during getting.
Hugh, thank you. As I moved through with you listening, the humility of all of these, but at the same time, the depth. And I just love the idea of the card game. And when I'm playing cards, I'm not a big game player, but cards, I played canasta as a child, and it was a rich card game for me. And when I move into this, you can watch states and others that you can learn from. And I think those are the parts of that consciousness that I'm moving in and It's the same in any group conscience, just being here at camp, just being here to learn all the ways that each of you see Swedenborg. It's a wonderful gift to bring my own states to a higher consciousness. And where I'm lacking, you know. And I think in group conscience we tend to move around a lot more when we're in community. We move around a lot more. So I think that's a gift.
Can I tell a joke?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay, so you get a bunch of Swedenborgs in a circle, and somebody talks about some topic, and then the next person talks, and then the next person talks, and you have to go around forever, because everybody is listening to what each other is saying, and they're developing and getting deeper into their understanding. So your talk about being is really important, because when we listen to each other, we develop, but we also go, it's like a spiral.
Mhm. I'll say a stopping point, but I would say that yes, community is very valuable. It can be challenging because we're with others whose belief systems are different than our own, especially as that's showing up in politics. But when the society politically is so polarized, they don't talk with each other. It's condemnation, one side or the other. So thank you all